What is the most main character energy moment you've ever witnessed in real life? So I agreed to be maid of honor for my best friend. Meanwhile, I had planned my sister's birthday shower months ahead, mailed invitations and coordinated family flying in to surprise her. The bride knew all of this and was invited. Then she moved her Nashville bachelorette weekend to the same weekend as the shower. When I pointed this out, she said, "Well, I hope you make the right choice." And my maid of honor dress went to a girl who needed one for prom. Next story. I manage a bakery. One night, a woman came by after the doors were locked and lights turned down. She knocked on the door, then tried to knock the door down when staff wouldn't let her in. She screamed and hit the door for a while before giving up. The next day, she left reviews on multiple platforms about how terribly she had been treated. When I called her back, she played the victim, and I had to let her know I had reviewed the cameras, and she seemed rather threatening. I wouldn't have let her in either, and eventually she dropped it. A few days later, she sent the shop an email asking for us to post flyers, collaborate on social media, etc. to promote her business. What the hell? Next story. Probably my own kid. Penalty shootout at his primary school sports day. He would have been maybe 6 and he scored a goal. Every other kid just returned to their place in line, win or lose. But not my guy. No, he followed it up with a flat-out lap of the pitch with his shirt over his head and then a massive knee slide towards the crowd like it was the effing World Cup. It was genuinely funny and everyone was in stitches. But at the same time, I was like, dear God, what am I raising? Next story. A 19 or 20-year-old kid at the DMV who couldn't get his license because he failed the driver's test again. The person helping him was patient at first, but eventually they started repeating stuff back to him louder and louder so everyone could hear how stupid he was. He was adamant that because he had spent X dollars paying to take the test so many times that he should just get the license. And of course, the kid's mother was there to argue on his behalf that in spite of failing the test, he should get the license. And it's worth noting that he was definitely not disabled in any noticeable way, unless we are counting off-the-charts self-absorbed narcissism as a disability. The kid just got louder and whinier and more belligerent at each stage of the circular conversation, and eventually the security guard gently bounced him from the establishment. He screamed nonsensical profanity on the way out, and his mother was muttering a bunch of curses at them too. I know this is a cliche that people on the internet use, but I swear, as soon as they were out the door, we all clapped for the security guy. Next story. My kid was diagnosed with cancer at age 4. She's all good now, more than a decade later. At the time, a family member who cannot tolerate not being the center of attention flew back from a temporary overseas position that was supposed to last like a year. I was overwhelmed and in the hospital for 2 weeks during my kid's initial diagnosis, lost 6 pounds the first week, silently sobbing in the shower every night. Said family member called me bawling because I hadn't celebrated their coming home enough. Next story. Famous comedian approached my friend's girlfriend in the airport while he was off buying something. He came back and the comedian acted as if he should know who he is. My friend asked him, after he never introduced him, "Am I supposed to know who you are?" And the comedian was visibly taken aback. It was hilarious. After he left, my friend turned to me and said, "Yeah, I know who he is, but he's a jerkhead." Absolute legend. Next story. Went to Tokyo last year, and there was someone who I assume was a TikTok influencer who stood in the center of the Shibuya Scramble, looked up to the sky, opened her arms, and began spinning around as if making a girl power travel blog. She even had a cameraman filming her during the 30 seconds that everyone could cross. Next story. So I currently have a coworker that is so oblivious to how she affects other people, I think it qualifies. For example, if we're all doing the same thing that is difficult, gross, unpleasant, all she will talk about is how unpleasant it is for her, and wants us all to commiserate and pitch in to do some of her work so that she has to do less of it. She seems to think that if we don't complain about something, we actively like it. As you can guess, she is becoming less popular by the day. Next story. On a crowded bus, packed to the nuts, pulled up at the last stop before leaving downtown. A few more people were able to crowd on, but the driver had to say, "Sorry, everyone else has to wait for the next bus." 5 to 10 minute wait, not horrible weather. And this one person decides, though, that they must get on and kicks up a fuss at the door, refuses to get out of the doorway so the driver can close the door, yelling that they worked hard all day and deserve a ride home now. This is discrimination. Why are you denying me a ride? And there's probably 20 other people waiting behind them. They're not the only person being denied a ride, and driver tells them he cannot safely fit one more person on. Please step back. Numerous times, then radios dispatch to send the police. and we all groan because they'll take 10 to 15 minutes to arrive. Then the driver will have to give a statement, etc. And at that point, we'll be delayed half an hour minimum because this person thinks they're special. We may as well get all off because the next bus will be here before the police get here. But that bus is going to be full too because it's rush hour. So probably more like an hour added to everyone's commute because of this person. But that didn't happen, because this one big guy forces his way to the front of the bus. He wasn't far behind the driver, but it was fully packed. He steps up to the douche canoe and pushes them off the doorstep. Driver slams the door and takes off. Everyone clapped and said thank you. Alright, I'm not like a huge muscly guy. I don't look like The Rock. I don't look like Brian Cage or anything like that, but I wish I did so I could step up in situations like this and just Sparta kick people. You don't see that enough in day-to-day life. That person deserves to get Sparta kicked off the bus, and maybe the people behind that person will catch them. Maybe not. Maybe they'll catch them and then just drop them on the floor like, ew, don't touch me. Some people just deserve to get Sparta kicked and drop kicked. That's my personal philosophy for 2026. Anyway, next story. So, one time, this lady and this guy helped a homeless person outside the bar by talking to him for 5 minutes. They spent the rest of the night going on about it to the bartender and acting like heroes, as they did the whole breakdowns of what happened and how they just had to step in and help someone in need. The bartender just really wanted them to stop talking. As for me, I was sitting on my own, and they insisted on sitting opposite of me to have a talk with me about life and what it takes to be truly selfless. I did snap at them eventually, which got them to leave me alone. Next story. Was standing in a decent line at the post office, like 20 people. Everyone is minding their own business. An older woman, maybe 50s, walks in and exclaims, "That is a huge line! This is ridiculous!" very loudly. One of the postal workers just looked up, assessed she was going to be an issue, and said, "Ma'am, I'll help you now." So this chick got to skip the whole line. I guess that's one way to work this system. Next story. Probably 20 years ago, I was hanging out in downtown Seattle when some drunk dudes got in an altercation with police outside a bar. Like half a dozen cops were wrangling guys who were resisting. Typical nighttime city crap. Then this dude with a giant beard just walks through them all like he parted the Red Sea. They moved out of his way, and everyone just stopped what they were doing as he was walking through the chaos. Then resumed after he passed. As he was walking by the bar, he grabbed a drink and a piece of pizza that was sitting on a table and just walked off into the nighttime. Next story. I used to be a part of the local comedy scene. One of the most known individuals at the open mics was a trust fund baby, whose dad was a judge. He never told a joke that he didn't steal from someone else and rarely was in a lineup. After 18 months of social networking, he went to the local newspaper and declared he was headed to New York to become famous. Well, I heard he ended up in rural Wyoming because his dad didn't want him embarrassing him anymore in the hometown. I have the newspaper article, but I think that might be too far. Next story. Used to have a friend that acted like those live streamers before streaming was a thing. Always screaming, making jokes that weren't funny, putting others down. Dude always talked about getting women, but the 4 years I knew him never saw a woman get near him unless she was getting paid. Also, went to jail because he thought it would be funny to scream at some kids while we were driving. He set the foundation for the hate I have for live streamers. Please, people, tell your children you love them and give them attention. Next story. Girl at work who thought she had the right to know everything about everyone found out one of our mechanics, completely different department than where she worked, recently had a baby. Instead of congratulating him, she just stood there in front of him, blocking his way and said, "Why did I not know about this? I didn't even know your wife was pregnant," in a tone that suggested he had failed her and had been withholding info she was entitled to. He replied with, "You don't need to know everything," and walked away. It was glorious. Next story. My husband's ex-wife threw a 30th birthday party for herself at a rec center rental room and had party games, balloons, gift bags with little dinosaur erasers and pencils in them and childhood snacks. Halfway through the party, she had a loud tantrum because no one was playing any of the games or dancing, and we were all apparently ruining her birthday party by standing around just socializing. And when I say she sounded exactly like Veruca Salt and Caillou had a baby, I'm not exaggerating. The friendship ended shortly after this display. Oh, and she also cut off all of her very long hair on the day of our wedding and garnered a whole lot of attention for this stunt. She made a demo of karaoke Christmas songs that she sang into a crap microphone, with all the words altered in sexual ways about her husband, and insisted on playing this arrangement of torture over and over on the last day we saw her on Christmas morning years ago. Edit. For a sample, there was a song about her husband releasing himself on her toes to the melody of The Little Drummer Boy. and I still can't unhear it to this day. She was a lot. Like, a lot. I'm so relieved to never have to see her again. Next story. A guy I went to high school with made a long post to announce big changes in his life, mainly his new job selling roofs door to door. It went on for several paragraphs about how hard he has worked on his degree, Associates Online, which I'm not knocking, but you'll understand in a minute. And then he went on about how he's been job searching for months for someone to give him a chance. He interviewed at my place of employment, by the way. He didn't get the job because he took off his shoes and sat cross-legged in his chair. He wasn't wearing socks. Then he continued with how his wife had supported and loved him so much. He went in about how he's the man now that he always wanted to be, and that the rest of the year was looking up. Then, in the very last sentence, he mentioned offhand that he's also proud of his wife for getting her master's degree while working full-time, and also that she'd given birth a week after she graduated, and that because he's such a great guy, she gets to take a few weeks off her nursing job to recover. Yes, his wife worked full-time as a nurse while pregnant and still earned a master's degree. I'm assuming she was the one paying all the bills, while he spent months being unemployed, and he is giving her the gift of recovering, and he genuinely believed he was the one that deserved praise. Next story. Girl I used to play with when I was a kid, we were both 12. We were in her house once, and we were all alone. Her parents were out. Around 10:30 p.m., we realize there are weird noises coming from the other room. We slowly peep to see that two men in black masks have broken into the home. They were not aware of the fact that we were in the house, and I was scared AF. But this girl was something crazy. She took a butcher knife and slowly crawled through the floor behind some furniture. I was telling her not to go, and this girl with all her force attacked the person standing near in the leg and effing screamed like a maniac after that. The other guy ran away, and this guy fell down screaming in pain. My friend then steps on his chest, pointing the knife to him, and says to me, "Call the police." And here I am astonished by this performance of power by a kid my age. Effing main character. Next story. That one guy in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, he got through all the questions with no problem. In the last question, he still had the phone a friend option. He called someone, a friend, a brother, or father, I don't remember who, and when he called, he said he was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and the last question. Then he proceeded to say that he doesn't really need any help since he already knows the answer. He just wanted to call him and tell him that he's a millionaire now. And then he just answered correctly and won the show. Next story. So I never got to witness it, but I heard the stories of a guy we knew who went to a funeral for his grandma. We learned that he usually has a prank war with a cousin. This cousin told us the story, and without considering that this was a funeral and the cousin had done nothing to incite the continued prank war, the guy pulled a chair out from under his cousin as he was sitting after a speech about grandma so he would fall. He fell and rolled hard in front of about 150 people. Then Mr. Pranks-a-Lot thought it would be funnier to fart as hard as he could during a moment of silence for their dearly departed. Mind you, the guy was around 27 at the time. When he was called out for his poor behavior, he doubled down and had a fit over no one dealing with his cousin for the past pranks during his family gatherings. He stood on that soapbox for weeks after the funeral as he got angry calls from his family about his choices. At the same time, he was crashing on our couch and already pissing us off after a couple of months of no job, no contribution, no nothing. Dude really thought he was the main character everywhere. I have so many stories about him, I could write a book, maybe a trilogy. Next story. I work with a real narcissist. He owns 1/3 of the business. Blue collar, we help people fix their locks, etc. But he insists on staying on the floor and has no leader or owner responsibilities, only the paycheck for it. He likes to be there where he can manipulate people hands-on. Everything is about him, and he does exactly what he wants when he wants it. And you can't really delegate to him because he will do the opposite or nothing at all. He will make it so that it's on his terms, and he will constantly lie about what the customers say to make it seem like we misunderstood something or made a mistake in the interaction. Or if he does what you say, he's luring you in, making you think that he is actually all right, and then it backfires. Always. He will belittle you if you make a mistake and play the victim if you call him out. If things get too bad, he will whine to his sister, who will then yell at her husband, the brother-in-law, who will tell people to leave him be. Rinse and repeat. There is no way of removing him, period. He has a desk behind mine, and I have to be around him a lot. It's exhausting and a real science how to navigate him. He is in fact a textbook narcissist. Luckily, he does not have the intellect that many narcissists have, though. Next story. Years ago, I lived in Southern California, and some friends and I went down to Rosarito, Mexico for a long weekend. While we were at the border, crossing on the way back, dude in front of us in line told the federales, "I'm an American citizen, your Mickey Mouse laws don't apply to me." They dog-walked him into a back room. and I assume gave him a comprehensive lesson on the concept of national sovereignty. Next story. At a remembrance for my wife's coworker who passed away from cancer. Her boss, who is a vile and all-encompassing narcissist, showed up much later than everyone else, made a huff outside, and proceeded to tell everyone, "I can't be here for long. My family member passed away and I really can't deal with funerals or seeing dead people." And it was not a viewing, just a gathering for people to give their condolences to the family who lost their father, husband, son. And if it was something you couldn't handle, why would you show up in the first place? See you next Tuesday? Next story. My father, he was dying. My day was a cycle of getting up early and sitting with him before heading into work, going back to the hospital when I knew the doctor made his rounds, back to work, rinse, repeat, etc. Everyone on staff knew exactly what was going on. Well, one of my direct reports complained to our manager that I didn't respond when she said good morning one day. Jerk, I can't even remember if I saw you, much less heard you. And if I had, it was most definitely not a good morning. Next story. A few months ago, I took my daughters to the aquarium. They were under 1 at the time, so my partner and I both had them in a baby carrier so we could get around easier and to not be in anyone's way with a huge double pram. Now, it's a very busy aquarium, and in the underwater section, there are signs everywhere telling you which side to walk and which side to stand on if you want to stop and look for longer. A lady, she placed her phone against the glass with a portable light attached and started filming herself, looking around as all the animals swam around her. And can you guess which side she was standing on? It was so cringe. I also hate when people record in public spaces without other people's consent with the intention of posting it online. Next story. I saw both kinds in one day. I went to a kinky people meetup in a new city. These are public open invite meetings, usually at a restaurant that has event space. You dress like normal, no sex or kink, just meet new people, and once you know them, you might go to the private meetings that are spicier. Well, there was another person who was new there, who thought he was hot crap, giving commands to people, demanding he be called daddy, talking effing weird to the waiter. Every time he would just get ignored harder by the people who heard him being such a loser. Total outcast and didn't even know it. Was being super annoying for about an hour, but not annoying enough for anyone to tell him to F off. Then, a guy walked in, who really was the main character, a real dominant personality. People who knew him came up to say hi. He went to everyone else he didn't recognize to introduce himself, and he said, "I run a rope house. You may call me sire. Not as in sir, but as in desire." Which would be the effing cringiest thing I'd ever heard of if he didn't have some sort of magical aura around him. No other person could say that sentence and still look cool. Then he introduced himself to the pushy weirdo, who decided to get in a weird contest where he stated he would never permit a dominant authority over him, would not call him sire, and asked for his real name. The dude then said, "I can tell you've been making everyone around you uncomfortable all evening. You have mistaken aggressiveness, pushiness, and rudeness for dominance. I do not think you're welcome here." Then the weirdo just left, bowed his head, looked at the floor, and walked out before he even got his food. The sire guy really was a main character of the entire state. He lived probably the most interesting life I've ever heard, and the more I got to know him, the more astounded I was by his ability to say things that would be cringe or seem like outright lies from anybody but him. Next story. I had a friend in military college who, when he was panicked, moved like a Looney Tunes character. I have no idea how. I think he was trying to make smooth, sleek movements while hurrying at the same time, but he genuinely moved like a cartoon character. And it was hard to keep a straight face in those moments, and sometimes it did feel like we were in this guy's movie. His best moment was pulling a bunch of ridiculously well-rehearsed dance moves out in a 6 a.m. dance battle, which also had that weird cartoony quality. Dude was also a bit of a nut, but we all were. Next story was at a Tyler the Creator concert. Lil Yachty was playing beforehand, and surprisingly, no one was singing one of his most popular tracks, Broccoli. Anyways, like in the old days, being the musically addicted kid, I obviously screamed that whole song out with my chest. I was the only one in my section who was actually singing or screaming with him, and he deadass looks straight at me and starts putting his microphone to the audience and starts going harder. But literally core memory and something I'm carrying with me for the rest of my life. Next story. I was a police officer, and a colleague told me her and her partner once had an emergency where someone got stabbed in the throat with a broken bottle. The guy was lying on the ground, she was putting pressure on his artery, there was blood everywhere, and her partner was busy calling for an ambulance and so on. This was at one of the biggest train stations of our city, in broad daylight, and the emergency was delaying some trains because of it happening. Then, a woman in the classic fancy high society girl attitude, fashionably dressed and small purse in her arm, came over to them, put one leg over the stabbing victim, who was literally dying on the ground, bleeding out, so she stood right in front of my colleague, asked her how much longer this will take since she's got an appointment. The effing audacity! Her partner later told her if he wasn't so busy calling for help, he would have punched her right through her face, then and there. Some people are just beyond saving, let me tell you. Next story. Kid playing at the end of a narrow tunnel at the airport. Businessman walking at speed trailing a suitcase collided with said child, knocking them flying out of the way, and said man just carried on as if nothing had happened. You'd think someone would have rounded on the guy, but we were all trying to help the wee kid and the parents. Next story. Via my husband. I am VVVLC with my mother-in-law because this is a narcissist who doesn't respect boundaries. Well, husband met her for coffee, he is a saint, and mentioned casually that I was off on a very big trip to catch up with my family. She exclaimed with much clutching of pearls, "Well, no one told me she was going to Australia." Like it has anything to do with her whatsoever? Insufferable. So everyone, I had to use a little bit of brain power here, but I realized that VVVLC means very, very, very low contact. I got it. I didn't even have to Google it. I'm so proud of myself. Also, I'm a little sick today. I'm on the downturn, and I'm getting better as I record. So maybe my strength comes from narrating. I'm literally feeling better as the video progresses. This is amazing. My throat doesn't hurt. I think I could sing. I won't, though. Next story. So, when I got my cancer diagnosis, it was overwhelming. I didn't want to keep telling people, so I just posted a Facebook update. My sister, who I had very little contact with at the time, calls me, screaming how dare I post it on Facebook without telling her first. Did I have any idea how it made her feel when people asked her how I was doing, and she didn't even know I had cancer? How dare I make her look so foolish? Next story. The guy thought he was the main character, but was actually just an extra in an episode of Seinfeld. Was sitting in a waiting room at the doctor's office, and suddenly I hear a roaring engine coming out of this guy's phone. He's listening to some video about the history of the V8 at full blast. Then the phone rings, and he answers it on speaker. Next story. I went to high school with a guy that was pretty much universally known to be a jerk. If you were lower in social standing than him, he was a bully. If you were on the same level, he was just a tool. He played football, but none of the other athletes liked him either because he was a crappy teammate. Now, I'm sure he had some friends, but overall, he was just known for being a massive douche. For purposes of this story, we'll call him Ryan, because that was his name. Good chance it still is. So, come graduation day, they made the standard, "Please hold all applause until the end" announcement, meaning that most kids only got cheers from their family and maybe a few friends when their name was called. Ryan evidently felt like he didn't get enough cheers, so he turned as he walked across the stage and gestured like he was trying to get the crowd pumped up. The graduating class of roughly 600 booed him instead, and I remember him looking disappointed and the audience of parents/relatives looking horrified. This is awesome. Do you guys know what this is? Like that person mentioned earlier, how on the internet there's the "and everybody clapped." This is the opposite, and everybody booed. 600 people think you suck. That's awesome, but not for him. Oh, I love this so much. And everyone booed. Next story. So, wife and I entered a crowded coffee shop, put in our order, and then looked around for some seats. We found a table and sat down, but I noticed someone had forgotten their car keys on the table. I got up and went to take the key to the staff, but some lady at the back of the line stopped me and was all like, "What are you doing with my keys?" And I said, "Oh, sorry, I thought someone had forgotten them." And she responds, No, I was saving that table for myself and my friend." And I kind of just looked at her blankly after that for a moment, and I said, well, here's your key," and then returned to the table. And I'm sorry, but you need something more substantial to call dibs on a table. Maybe that's just my main character showing, but if you're gonna reserve a table, you need some skin in the game. Keys, phone, laptop, an ass in the seat. A random car key on the table, it's not sufficient. And the part that was most funny to me, and I swear I'm not making this up, the lady was wearing a shirt that said, "Supporting Character Energy." Next story. One of my exes won a yearly contest for Best Local Bartender, run by the local newspaper a couple of years back, by bribing people for votes with free drinks. Next year, when we were dating at the small party thrown for that year's nominees and winners that functions as a networking event, we are waiting in line, and he walks up to an employee and asks if there's a separate, faster VIP line for previous winners. My dude, nobody cares you won a single popularity contest once, and if I won 10 years in a row, you're definitely not getting in before me. Our group humbled him so quick. I I really should have ended it there, but I am not always a smart woman. Next story. I had a whole group of main characters that I was unfortunately hanging out with at a metal festival in Utrecht. I could tell you a dozen stories of how embarrassing it was to be around them, but that would take forever, and I would have to relive it, and no thanks. My favorite, though, was when this photographer was taking photos of this beautifully dressed up woman in a fantastic pose. Like, she looked like an official model. We were just walking past to get to the next show, but then the couple of the group, two metalheads with furry gear and Amazon chokers on, stop in front of the photographer and pose. There was a full 30 seconds of this weird pause where they stared at the camera, snarling with their hands out like they were holding a wand and casting a spell, trying to make themselves look scarier. Both the model and the photographer were staring. It was like watching a skit. After a painful amount of time, the photographer took a single photo and waited until they moved. Took them a minute to understand the shoot was finished too. The worst part is, they were 100% oblivious. I have the picture somewhere and it makes me smile every time. Next story. I know people are mostly replying with main character syndrome, but I read main character energy as this person really was the star of this story. So, I was at a community center party, and a fire broke out in the kitchen. It wasn't spreading that fast, but the place was packed with kids and moms and a lot of panic. Then there was a young guy who usually worked with the beavers/cubs, etc. In the middle of most of the adults freaking out, he put a kid up on his shoulders and starts singing, "We're going on a bear hunt." And immediately the kids fall in line behind him and follow him out of the building, singing, and the rest of us chivied the moms out behind. I don't know what kind of mind control they put in those call and response kids songs, but those kids calmed down and knew what to do quicker than any actual fire drill I've ever seen. Next story. Friend planned a party for everyone to attend with a flower girl theme. She then had us all take pictures and post them on Facebook so everyone could vote for best outfit. She also made a word speech we all had to do and was egging everyone on to get done first. No mingling, just social media watching. She also planned a destination wedding on a cruise ship when her boyfriend hadn't even proposed. And when I told her I felt weird going, she said everyone should have enough PTO so it's fine. No mention of the cost of the cruise, by the way. Next story. My friend subleases a building and pays the rent to the tenant, and then they pay the landlord. Well, in this case, she paid them, and then the landlord came by and said no one paid him. So obviously the tenant didn't give him her money. So I offer to help, and I'm trying to get a hold of this tenant, who apparently owns a few properties himself. I call his secretary, and she says, "Oh, he's not here. Here's his number, though." Then I text him, and he's like, "Don't worry about it." Completely dodging the fact that he has her rent money hostage. Well, that's not good enough for me, so I start calling him, blowing his crap up. Then he finally answers, and he's got some BS excuse that he's hosting these elites. But he said, and I can't crap you on this, "Sorry, I'm the Rain Man. You know I'm out here kissing babies and so on and such," and I was just dumbfounded. Like, brother, just give the man our effing rent money. Next story. I'm at my uncle's funeral. My older cousin's new wife tells me that she understands she just had a miscarriage. Then, less than a year later, at another uncle's funeral, she loudly proclaims that she understands grieving because she just had another miscarriage. Then, at my father's funeral, she said, "Oh, I understand your feelings. I just had another miscarriage." And then another relative was diagnosed with terminal cancer later on. And the second she opened her mouth, I said, "If you say you had a miscarriage again, you will be sorry." Next story. My long-term partner and me ended up breaking up last year, and we kept a lot of what was going on private while we tried to work things out. But our closest friends knew what was going on. One of my best friends of 20 years decided to completely end our friendship because she missed who I used to be and that I wasn't there for her like I used to be. She touted this story around to all of our mutual friends and turned herself into a victim who was abandoned during the worst year of my life. The main character energy is insane. Next story. Girl got out of her car in the Zakim Bridge during Boston rush hour so she could take a few selfies. Then took a writing class with this girl who would always come in late. Panting heavily and loudly, she would stand in the doorway and look dramatically around the room for a seat, and then pick the furthest one from the door so she had to squeeze past everyone and say, "Excuse me." She would then sit and start interrupting the professor with questions or remark on, "Oh, that was due today?" loudly, even though the professor literally had the syllabus pulled up on the projector or the whiteboard for us to review. And she would also steer the conversation to her long-ass alt history novel and ask the professor during class about X and Y in her story when we were talking about something irrelevant. Also, she farted in my face twice and never acknowledged it. Next story. A guy my dad used to work with who, and I'm not making this up, nicknamed himself the Gob. He would try to take over any conversation people were having by being as loud, as obnoxiously as possible. If he felt people weren't paying attention to him, he would shout, "Hey!" at the top of his lungs. He thought it was endlessly funny. Very few other people did, though. They worked together back in the 1980s. In this day and age, he'd be the obnoxious twat constantly pranking his coworkers and putting it on his TikTok account. Next story. When I had a miscarriage, I called and mentioned it to my landlord at the time. His wife went, "Oh, that's sad," then proceeded to go on for about 10 minutes how much she wanted a baby. Then I had a second miscarriage a year later. She showed up to pick up the rent the next day. When she finally noticed I was extremely pale and couldn't stand fully upright, she snapped, "What's the matter with you?" And I told her. And first, she berated me for not telling her I was pregnant again. I didn't tell a lot of people for obvious reasons. Then she asked me how far along I was. When I told her 10 weeks, she gave the fakest sympathetic smile and said, "Oh, you were so close." A few months after that, she woke me out of a sound asleep to tell me she'd been charting her cycles and she was at her most fertile period, and if she had sex that day, she would almost positively get pregnant. Next story. My extended family lives overseas. I wanted to do a wedding celebration with my extended family because they would not be able to travel for my actual wedding. My wife and I rented out a venue and ordered a significant amount of food. The guests who came were all family, my cousins, my grandparents, aunts, and uncles. One of my uncles who came, though, came with his fourth wife, who I hadn't yet met. He went through wives so fast that I stopped keeping track, and she brought her two daughters, who I suppose were my step-cousins, but had never actually met them prior to this either. Well, my wife and I dropped a significant amount of money on all the food. Also important to note that my cousins, outside of my uncle's family, are all quite poor. When we finished dinner, I 100% planned to give my poor cousins whatever food was left over when dinner was done. It was high-quality food, and it would have gone a long way with them. Plus, I actually knew them and wanted them to have it. Well, before I knew it, my step-cousins were loading up as much food as they could into their purses and took all of the leftovers with them. I was actually really pissed off. Who the hell shows up and takes all the food without asking? They also didn't need it. My uncle is very well off, and he's aware that my other cousins and grandparents are struggling. Next story. I was in an emergency room for clinicals, and we had an unconscious patient in front of us who severely needed help. Blood was coming from everywhere. The vitals were not promising, the room was filled with people doing different things, and there was a lot of panic and noise in the air. All of a sudden, this doctor came in, and the whole room went quiet. I could feel the relief instantly. There was already a doctor in the room, but everyone could tell that this was the doctor. He gave everyone directions and put in orders in such a calm manner that I was surprised it was the same room. Ran that code like it was an orchestra he's conducted since birth. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and to this day, I aspire to be the person that brings relief. The patient survived. Positive main character energy. Next story. Was at the red phone booth, quirky speakeasy, and the guy next to me seemed really friendly and charismatic, chatting up everyone around him. My colleague and I were enjoying some quiet conversation when he turned to me, introduced himself, then started talking to me and asking me questions. As soon as we had a pause in our conversation and I went to sip my drink, he turned his phone, which I hadn't noticed was on the counter, filming, and started talking to his followers on Twitch about how you can meet anyone in these kind of places and how cool it was. I was instantly disgusted. Not only did he not tell us he was recording us, but the over-the-top friendliness now made sense and was clearly super disingenuous. My friend and I felt uncomfortable and didn't want to talk about anything until he left, which luckily he did shortly after. My colleague and I then discussed what if he caught any of our conversation before we started talking to him and how many people viewed it. Thankfully, when he left, he said goodbye to his followers, all 4 of them. Next story. Just the other day, I was skiing with my kids. We were inside the lodge for lunch and we were heading outside to hit the slopes again. There was a vestibule heading outside, 2 sets of doors. I opened and held the door to let my daughter, 5, through. I noticed a guy coming behind me, so I held the door for him too. My daughter held the second outside door open. Big struggle for her, but she did it. This guy that was behind me is clunking along in his ski boots though, looking down at his phone, never once raised his head. Did not acknowledge that I had held the door, still head down through the vestibule. He just cleared the second door as my daughter was struggling to get it open, never once looked up from his phone. Didn't thank her either, just kept marching and texting. Never felt more like an NPC in my life. Like we were just a part of the background and programmed to open the door for him at the very moment he needed them open. I wonder if I had not held that door open, or if my daughter didn't hold hers open, if he would have just run right clean into one of the doors. But the rational part of me understands that he is very likely just enough aware of his surroundings that that would not have happened. And he is in fact just a self-absorbed jerk. Next story. Left my abusive husband and was ostracized by my entire faith community. Lost my job too as a result. Work for a faith-based organization. Was barely scraping pennies together to pay my mortgage. Nothing left for food. Then one of my closest friends, someone I had spent countless hours listening to and helping, she was younger than me and called me her mentor, went silent on me. I reached out and told her I wasn't doing well and asked her if she would meet with me. I really needed a friend. She was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing well either. I've got a really bad jet lag." And I later found out that she was telling people that she felt betrayed by me because I left my husband. A few months later, she messaged me and asked me if she could borrow my car for a month while I was out of town. Next story. On our honeymoon, I found messages between my wife and her colleague/affair partner talking about their planned marriage. When confronted, the first thing she screamed at me was, "I am the one who suffers in all of this." A few months later, she came over to pick up some stuff. She'd seen a picture of me with another woman, like a Polaroid with me and an old friend I'd reconnected with, and was berating me for how our marriage must have meant nothing to me, and how I could move on so quickly, etc., etc., while she was pregnant with this guy's child. Next story. I witnessed a good main character energy event. An evening in the city center, there was this hedgehog. Some drunk idiots thought it would be funny to kick the hedgehog into the canal. We all saw it. Obviously, it pissed us the hell off, but before we could do anything, this one dude just spawned in out of nowhere, and he jumped after the hedgehog into the canal. He saved it within a minute or so, came back on dry land, and proceeded to whoop the asses of these three guys involved with the kicking of the hedgehog into the water. And we were all stunned like, how the hell did he just, yup? He did! He saved the hedgehog and gave these three a good beating, and he left the scene all within minutes. Next story. Every time I take my dad to see a movie, he somehow turns into the protagonist of a cheap, unfunny 90s comedy movie. When the trailer starts, he very loudly says, "Just play the damn movie already!" And then he looks around the theater like he's expecting people to start doing the same thing. He does this maybe 2 or 3 times per round of trailers on top of general complaining all through the trailers, complete with dramatic groans and head shakes, and he does it every time he goes to a movie. He swears that he sees people nodding in agreement and that people start complaining after he does. But it's low-key, gotten to the point where I just don't go to the movies with him if I can help it. And before anyone asks why we don't just show up later when we all go as a family, everybody but him actually wants to see the trailers, so we always get there early enough to see them. My dad is the only one who hates them, and he makes it everybody's problem. And this doesn't even include the fact that he sings along with every song he hears in a movie that he knows, whether it's an actual sing-along screening or not. Next story. A girl who used to be in our friend group legitimately said, "Everyone wants to F me," then went absolutely ape crap when she tried to hit on me and I rejected her. Then, other notable stuff she has done in the 4 months I had known her. Claimed to be a makeup influencer because one of her Instagram posts hit 10,000 views. She has less than 800 followers. Claimed to be the girl on the Tesco ad, the ginger girl biting into pea pods, despite looking nothing like her, and that being an ad that was around years before she was born. Accused several men of SA when they rejected her advances and spread rumors that they were trans or gay because that would be the only reason someone would reject her. She cheated on her boyfriend and is now dating him and the guy she cheated on him with because she likes the money the new boyfriend can offer, and the old boyfriend has a car. Then she cried and wailed for hours because she wasn't the center of attention, and we got separated when we went to a club, and every time we go to that club, there is a seating area with a stripper pole on a balcony. She looks over the balcony and calls everyone losers, and stops people trying to get access to the seating area. It's not a VIP area or anything, anyone can go. And one time, she chimped out because a group of girls just walked by her into the area instead of being intimidated by her. And then, when I fell out with her, she screamed in my face that I effed up big time and I had lost everything, and that she owned our friend group and the clubs we went to, and that I shouldn't dare show my face there again. Our friend group sided with me instantly, by the way, and she actually lost everything and everyone, amongst other various things like that. Next story. Me. I said, "Yeah, I enjoy alone time because I spend so much time and energy thinking about other people, being there for people, and spending time alone, it's how I recharge. Those mental breaks allow me to continue supporting others when they need me." And my friend said, "That's weird. I never think of other people." And me internally goes, "Yeah, it shows." Next story. My aunt had a stroke and is currently in a nursing home recovering. She's in a crappy home where we have to have someone with her 24/7 to make sure she gets the care she needs. They will literally forget to give her meds if we are not there. Her husband made her promise she would never put him in a place like that because he deserves better. He also won't pay for her to go to rehab because it's expensive. I hate him now. Be careful who you marry. Next story. After organizing one of my friend's bachelorette party without her even knowing the destination, creating a group of her friends, paying for her flights and accommodations, going with her to see the wedding dress, and being there for every emotional breakdown, she asked me if I'd be her bridesmaid if another one of her friends couldn't make it. I agreed, but it gets worse. That friend couldn't come, so I'd be her bridesmaid. A few months later, she contacted me to say that because one of the groomsmen wouldn't be able to make it, they didn't need me as a bridesmaid anymore because it would look bad aesthetically? Oh, and all of this happened after we had already had an argument about how bad of a friend I am for disappearing a bit when I discovered my mom had cancer. Next story. I was at a concert in Columbus, Ohio, and unfortunately had to sit beside this mother-daughter duo from TikTok. I didn't acknowledge them at all, and the daughter kept scrolling through all her own TikTok videos, hoping I would say something. So embarrassing. Then later, there was a false alarm that went off right before the main act came on, and we all had to evacuate in a calm order up the stairs. Well, they started freaking out. The mom yelled, "Why are we barely moving? Ma'am, there's 10,000 people and leaving right now, and no one has came out or announced to say it's a true emergency." And she starts shoving past me and everyone else. But anyways, we go back to our seat. The daughter ended up switching seats with her mom, and at one point in the concert, one of the mom's friends came out of nowhere and just decided she was going to stand in my space and shoot a TikTok video. I was not having it and elbowed the hell out of her and screamed along to the music. She left. Most disgusting interaction. Next story. Oh, myself. When me and the girlies were in a Boston club, there was an entrance to the club next door with a bouncer blocking it. You had to go outside and pay to get into the other club. But for whatever reason, they were attached. Maybe owned by the same people. Anyway, we asked if we could get into the other club. He said no, but I reached into my bag and busted out a pack of Mentos and did the thing where you actually offer the Mentos to someone. And he actually let us in, and we couldn't believe it worked. Next story. This happened over 30 years ago, and I will never forget it. I worked in a retail pharmacy while I was going to night school. One night, a doctor called in a prescription for themselves about 10 minutes before we closed and said they'd be right there to pick it up. The pharmacist had agreed to stay late, so my supervisor and I stayed with her. 45 minutes after we were officially closed, she finally called it and we all left after she locked up. As everyone is walking to the cars, the doctor pulls into the parking lot and gets out of his car and starts cursing at us. He grabbed my supervisor and dragged him to the store entrance. My supervisor guys can't legally open the pharmacy part of the store, nor give out prescriptions. Fortunately, the pharmacist hadn't driven away yet, so she was able to go in and get his prescription for him. She was furious and banned him from the store. Next story. I had a guy, not a friend, an acquaintance. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 9 years. The last conversation I had with him was me yelling at him for wasting my time, lying to me about freelance web design work so I could come by and hear his MLM sales pitch. Then, almost 9 years later, this guy calls me up out of the blue to invite himself and his family to move 2 states over and move into my Quest bedroom. He thinks it would be a great opportunity to reconnect, and his wife always looked up to my wife, and his dad died, and his sister was getting his dad's house, so why not let him move in with me? What in the effing hell was that all about? Alright everybody, so I guess it's fair to say that a main character energy video heavily overlaps with a narcissist video. Not really surprising. I don't think I have any really personal relevant stories. I've worked in customer service fast food, but nothing so egregious or anything that I would comment on this thread if I found it. But anyway, guys, I'm feeling a bit better. Thank you all so much for watching, commenting, and have a really good day. Bye-bye!